they are not ready.
I think they're ready, but we have
These are quite 7 o'clock.
Here we are. Good evening and welcome to the December 5th regular meeting of the Novi Community School District Board of Education. Thank you for being here with us this evening. I would first ask for a roll call vote from Mr. Mena, please.
Trustee Cook, absent excused. Trustee Hood.
Here.
Trustee Mena is here. Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Roney is absent excused. Trustee Ruskin.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
here.
Terrific. Well, if you would all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda. Can I entertain a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mena, is there support? Supported by Mr. Smith. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Next is our student board member report. Thank you for being here. You want to introduce yourself to everybody? And
Yes, good evening everyone. My name is Lucy Kakudian and I'm here on behalf of Novi High School to give a report on what's going on at Novi High School. In academic news, Novi High School leads the way in ensuring our students and staff focus on self-care by incorporating homework-free Thanksgiving break. Student and teacher activities news. Novi High School will be hosting HOSA Regionals tomorrow. Good luck to all Wildcats participating. DECA District Competition will be held on December 13th. Good luck to all Wildcats participating. Congratulations to the 35 students who qualified to take the Round 2 exam for the Michigan Math Prize Competition. Novi Student Council, many clubs, classes, and sports teams adopted 17 children through the Novi Youth Assistance and brought them all of their holiday wants and needs. In athletic news, congratulations to those students named to the All-State Band and All-State Orchestra. These students are eligible to participate in the All-State Band and Orchestra performances held at the Michigan Music Conference in January with other honorees from around the state. Good luck to the girls basketball teams who are competing at home today. Good luck to the boys varsity hockey team, girls varsity gymnastics team, boys swim and dive team, and our cheerleading team who will be competing this weekend.
fantastic. Always lots going on over there, right? I love the self-care.
Yes.
Did you love that? Not
Me
having
too.
homework? Yeah, it's good. Hopefully you enjoy time with family.
Yes.
We're able to do that. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for being here. We do
Thank
really
you so
appreciate you
much.
taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Next is our, well, I have reports to the board.
We have no reports
reports to the board. And so I should really look at my board book. But next we have our comments from the audience related to agenda items. This is the first opportunity for anybody in the audience to address us about anything on our agenda. We'd just like you to keep your comments to 5 minutes and make sure you give a card, a green card identifying yourself to Mrs. Holly, who has got the glasses on her head back there. So if anybody else wants to speak, there's green cards over on the side. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Trumpy. My purpose here tonight is twofold. First, I am hoping that after attending 3 Board of Education meetings and 2 meetings of the Policy Committee, that today will be the last time I appear here to speak about protecting the rights of students to feel safe and seen in their classrooms. I believe my previous comments have adequately expressed my concerns, and I hope that tonight you will approve the Michigan Code of Educational Ethics, as well as in addition to the Employee Handbook specifying that a teacher's First Amendment rights are limited when acting on behalf of the district. Secondly, I am here to express my support for the new start time schedule that will be discussed tonight. The 2 issues may seem unrelated, but I feel that they are connected. In both cases, I am asking the district to support student mental health in action, not just in word. At the last meeting, I was impressed with the data presented by the Start Time Committee. I have also been a regular attendee of Dr. Matthews' excellent book club for several years, where I've had the pleasure of reading many books about how we can improve student outcomes. Time and again, these books have outlined the many benefits of later start times for teens. I have told you that I'm an educator. I am also a scientist by training. I have a bachelor's degree in cell and molecular biology and a master's degree in medical genetics. My diverse training has given me a deep appreciation for both the art and the science of education. Connecting with a challenging student, for example, is an art. There is no guidebook that teaches you that skill. But determining start times does not require guessing. It is not subjective. The data is quite clear that later start times for teens result in better academic performance, better mental health outcomes, and fewer behavioral challenges. I hope that the board will follow the data and approve the proposed schedule changes. Thank you to all of you for your hard work and dedication to the district.
Anyone else? That we do have a second opportunity, just so you know. You're welcome to approach the board with anything on our agenda. At the end of the meeting, we do have another opportunity, so if you want to stick around with us, you can always comment then as well. So it is entirely up to you. Would you like to talk now?
Might as well impart my wisdom now. Yeah, I just want to speak on the start time issue. I think generally, it's a good idea. I think the data supports moving it later. I think we missed an opportunity with the current proposal, which is we're ending up moving the Novi Meadows Upper Kill to a very early time. Realizing we have this relatively unique structure of two schools with two different grades. I think a better alternative would be to consider having a simultaneous bus pickup for both of those schools with a slightly staggered start time. So imagine a bus that picks up students 5 through 8. First stop could be middle school, second stop Meadows, or vice versa. I think what you would find is that we'll reduce our total number of bus runs, the number of miles and time on the road, but also the bus runs will be shorter because on average you'll pick up twice as many students at each stop. So that'll make up most of the time you lose by making one stop and then a second stop at the two schools. We already do something like this for the late buses, and I think this is a way you can achieve that time that we're the later start times without sort of penalizing the Meadows kids.
Thank you. You know what? You didn't introduce yourself to us. You just walk back over there. I know you filled out your card, which you'll give to Mrs. Holly, but if you would let us know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Srini Cherukuri, daughters of Omni in 5th grade and Faith on 2nd.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Mrs. Holly is right there. Right, is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time about our agenda? Okay, then we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is our consent items. We have 2 items on our agenda this evening for consent: approval of minutes and field trips. I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Mrs. Hood.
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education approve the consent items as presented.
Support. All right, it's been moved by Mrs. Hood and supported by Dr. Ruskin. The consent items don't require any discussion, so I will call the question. All those in favor of accepting the consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Motion carries 5-0. Next is our personnel report. I will turn to you, Dr. Matt.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Dr. Kinzer is on special assignment tonight for the board, investigating board goal number 4, and so he asked me to deliver his personnel report this evening. We have 2 new hires: Milagro Chavez, who's becoming a permanent sub bus driver, and then Aubrey Sove, who is becoming a care leader. We also have retirements and resignations: Krista Sarisa from the middle school English teacher, Melissa Krieger, who had been on a leave of absence, medical leave of absence. Her contractual leave of absence time is over, and so she needs to resign. And then Judy Sauer, literacy specialist at Novi Meadows, will retire.
All right. I would entertain a motion, please. Mr. Smith.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Smith and supported by Mr. Mena. Any questions or comments about these? I'm sorry about Judy Sauer. She's been there a long time, and I've really enjoyed the times that I have had the opportunity to work alongside her or with her. Unbook things. No, not that I was in the schools working, but anyways, I chaired a book thing over there once, and she was just immensely helpful and clearly loves the kids and loves helping them read, which is obviously something that we love in our district, is that our kids get excited about reading. So I'm sad to see her go. And these changes, these position changes, I might ask you a tough question. Does this mean that we will be replacing those people, perhaps? I'm assuming the permanent sub bus driver we will be. Jill's not here.
Jill is actually there.
Oh,
We're always looking to hire drivers.
Right.
Okay, well, let's make that announcement. We're always looking to.
There was, they had been a sub, and so they're becoming a permanent sub.
That's kind of what I thought.
And
So we need other permanent subs, most likely, is my guess. So, okay, fantastic. I will call the question. All those in favor of approving the personnel report as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next are our policy updates and revisions. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The Governance and Policy Committee has reviewed the following Lusk Albertson recommended updates and modifications to the Novi Community School District Policy Manual and is bringing them before the board for information, or bringing them to the board tonight for approval. We've had the opportunity to have discussion on these items at previous board meeting. And so these are presented by section with the update number is from Lusk Albertson. But we have reviewed these and there is an addition of a conflict of interest policy, a change to that we want approval of. There is a change about food deliveries that we would like the board to approve. There is the policy on curriculum that we would like the board to approve as well. Personnel, the changes about the employees providing sufficient documentation, we would like the board to approve. The Code of Ethics. It is important to note for the board that what we're asking the board to do on the Code of Ethics is to approve this policy addition to the Code of Ethics. And then the reference to the employee handbook will be is not a policy. It's put in the employee handbook, and the final version of that employee handbook statement will be kind of reviewed with all of our stakeholders, all of the employee groups before it's finalized. But you have the rough draft version. We believe that will probably be the final version, but we needed the board to approve the ethics policy first, and then we can go to the union groups and have them look at the statement that we're going to put in the employee handbook to finalize. There is the state required policy on the prohibition of referral or assistance for abortion. And then we have the policy on budget planning and adoption, which identifies our 10% fund balance. We have the policy on fixed assets, which Ms. Minnick is very excited about. It adds vehicles to the fixed assets. And then we have the policy on volunteers that we will ICHAT criminal background checks on volunteers annually. And then we have, those are the policies and the allowable fees on FOIA and labor costs. So those are the policies that come before the board this evening. We've had a chance to discuss these. And so we would ask that the board would approve these so that we can get them in our policy handbook.
All right, I would entertain a motion. Mrs. Ruskin, Dr. Ruskin, excuse me.
I will make a motion that it's in the best interest of the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the policy updates and revisions listed above and as presented.
Is there support?
I support.
It's been moved by Dr. Ruskin and supported by Mr. Smith. I know we've gone over this quite a bit. I think we referenced 3 separate meetings that we had with our board governance committee to kind of review this and go over it with a fine-tooth comb and come up with an
I
alternative.
just want to be clear that we're approving the alternate version, because there was some discussion on that.
The alternate,
One section.
that is supporting documentation for the handbook.
Right.
So that is not something the board
I
actually,
understand that, but that's.
The option 2, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to
option
make
2.
sure.
Right.
Well,
On the option 2 on the volunteer background checks.
Oh.
There were 2 options listed there.
Oh, okay.
We're approving.
Oh, okay.
The broader one, I think, that gives the kids more
Okay, I
protection.
apologize. I was looking at the
Correct.
supporting
Yeah, okay.
documentation.
I'll make sure.
Okay. Well, I will call the question. All those in favor of approving the policy recommendations as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Motion carries 5-0. Next is our opportunity for information and discussion. Dr. Matthews, I will turn to you on this.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Our district engaged in a strategic planning process during the last school year and identified as one area of attention student and staff mental health. We are examining a variety of areas that will support improved mental health for our students and staff. Homework and grading are 2 additional examples. And as mentioned this evening, the homework-free Thanksgiving break, for example. But tonight, we want to focus on our school start times. Several research studies indicate a connection between adolescent sleep cycles, mental health, and academic performance. In alignment with Board of Education Goal 3, which was an outgrowth of our strategic planning process that occurred in 2018-19, a commitment to promoting a district culture of well-being was made. As part of that process, I asked our administrative team for volunteers to serve on a district bell time committee to investigate and explore school start and end times, using this research as a guide while considering the constraints of district bus transportation, after-school activities, athletics, care, and other programming. The committee presented an overview of the research and the committee's findings to the Board of Education as a report at the November 21st, 2019 regular board meeting. It comes before the board tonight for information and discussion. There are several important considerations to keep in mind as we discuss the issue this evening. First, the school day start and end times are a negotiable item with our teachers union. We came to the board with our proposal first instead of going to the teachers union first because we wanted to make sure the board was supportive before we engaged in a conversation with our teachers. We're confident that if the board ultimately is supportive of the proposed changes, that we can work with our teachers group to finalize the start and end times for the 2020-2021 school year. While the teachers group was not part of the discussion, they will be part of finalizing the start and end times. Second, we are aware that this will impact adult schedules. It will disrupt how we have done school in Novi for many years, ever since I arrived in the district 9 years ago. But we bring this proposal because the research is quite clear that early start times have a negative impact on adolescents. Our focus is on the students, believing that the adults, be they staff or parents, can find ways to adjust. Third, the administrators in the district understand that this plan is not perfect. Our current schedule is not perfect as well. There are pluses and minuses to changing, just as there are pluses and minuses to staying the course. We bring this recommendation because we believe that the pluses for changing to a later start time for our middle and high school students outweigh the negatives. Fourth, I am aware that we did not highlight enough that changing start times and going from a 5-tier system to a 4-tier system will require us to enforce our school walk zones. You have before you tonight the walk zones of each of our schools. Ms. Minnick may address this as well, or Ms. Valentine. This change will require some students who currently are provided transportation to walk to school. The walk is not uphill both ways, as it was when I was young, but walking to school, it will require some students to walk to school. We're not changing our policy, but enforcing current policy in a way that we have not done before. Fifth, it is fair to ask why no teachers, parents, or students were represented initially on this committee. I made the decision not to create a committee comprised of many parties because this is a rather divisive and controversial issue. I wanted the initial first recommendation to focus on our students and what the research says about sleep and school start times. I wanted a proposal to get to the board that could be discussed and reviewed and examined. Administrators are hired to provide leadership and direction in the district. I felt that school start times were an issue that could have created tension and acrimony between parties in the district. With this, an administrative recommendation, everyone can focus their attention on the recommendation and not on who was on the committee that made the recommendation. In addition, everyone can be mad at the administrative team and not at each other. Finally, administratively, we also understand that this is a board decision. Our board policy 3008 states clearly that the superintendent will develop and recommend for approval by the board a school day that is consistent with the board's policies on student learning and achievement. The board's policy 2002 on learning and achievement provides some guidance when it states the core function of the school district is to educate students to prepare them to become productive and responsible citizens and adults. Administratively, we believe that this policy supports the aim to educate our students by creating a schedule that will support learning. Since we presented this proposal to the board, we have sent out a survey to staff and parents. We provided the board with the feedback that we have received from that survey. More survey data has come to us, and we will continue to provide that feedback to the board. The survey was sent to every parent and staff member in the district. Administrators have had conversations with their staff and parents, and I am having a parent coffee next week where we will discuss this issue at length. Ms. Carter at the high school has held parent and student conversations as well. Tonight I have asked Ms. Minnick to reintroduce herself as the chair of our committee and the charge that they were given. Mr. Cohn will summarize briefly the research. We will answer the questions that have come to us, a frequently asked question segment, if you will, and Ms. Minnick will do that for the board. Then we will turn it over to the board for your questions or comments, and we will respond as appropriate. The hope is that the board will be ready to vote on this issue December 19th. We ask that the board consider voting that day because it will then give us the needed time to communicate to our community and problem solve before implementation in September of 2020. So I now turn to Ms. May.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Thank you for that very thorough introduction. I want to just reiterate that, yes, the committee presented the research at the last board meeting, November 21st, along with the recommended bell time schedule. And this evening, we will have a brief recap of that presentation. It is the same PowerPoint presentation that was in last meeting's agenda, so that everyone has the same information. It's consistent. But we will just highlight some of those research slides. And as Dr. Matthews mentioned, we'll then go into addressing some of the drawbacks that we mentioned in that PowerPoint presentation. And then I will address some of the comments and questions and common themes we've been seeing in the survey responses. And then we will open it up for discussion, and we have members of our committee here this evening to respond to those questions and concerns. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Andy Cohn for a review of the research. Thank you.
Brief review.
I'll be brief. All right. I am sharing what we shared last week in a much briefer version. So first, just to kind of point out where we are as a district, our high school starts in the kind of earliest 10% of schools across the country. The recommendations that we'll talk about down the road and discussed last week, a lot of the medical community is arguing that 8:30 is kind of a more ideal time. So you can tell that with us starting before 7:30, we're pretty far in advance of those recommendations. So adolescents generally need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. This is well-established research. 9+ is ideal. The point I really want to highlight today in getting some of the feedback that I'm not sure everybody's aware of is that the timing of sleep is a really critical issue. So for example, pushing back or moving up start times, kids can't get that same chunk of sleep no matter when you do it. Adolescents have what we call a sleep phase delay. So you'll notice that kids, when they hit puberty, begin to not be sleepy until 10, 10:30, 11:30. So even if you said go to bed at 8, it doesn't work with their bodies functioning. They are still kind of sleep-brained all the way till about 8 o'clock in the morning. Currently, this is just some quick data from CDC and other research reports. 58% of middle schoolers get less sleep than they need. 73% of high schoolers get less sleep than they need. This reiterates that. It does have kind of a disproportionate effect on certain subgroups. This slide talks a little bit about this idea of sleep phase. So not only is the sleep phase that I discussed an issue, but in addition, the sleep that is most restorative, not physically, but psychologically, is called Rem sleep. And as you sleep over the course of the night, you increase the amount of Rem sleep you get. So, for example, when you fall asleep, you get about 45 minutes to an hour of non-REM, and then you have a short 10-minute REM period. And then you go back to non-REM sleep. And then you have about a 20-minute REM period. And this keeps changing, so over the course of the night, you're getting less non-REM and more REM. And so as a result, when our students who aren't going to go to bed, on average, until later anyway, are woken up at 5:30, however early it is they wake up, they're missing their most restorative sleep, psychologically. We know from research that there's pretty serious mental health impact for sleep deprivation, everything from physical things like diabetes and obesity to psychological illnesses, anxiety, depression. It increases sports injuries, behavioral problems. Risk behaviors is another one that is heavily affected by lack of sleep. So some of the data is pretty dramatic. When you look at research on lots of psychological metrics, you'll find that a couple % here or there is the difference in some given variable. This is pretty extreme. So each hour of lost sleep, for example, is a 38% increase in student self-reported feelings of hopelessness and sadness, a 58% increase in likely suicide attempts. Each hour of sleep dramatically increases the types of risk behaviors like binge drinking and unprotected sex, drunk driving, things like that. We're really focusing on student mental health, but we can point to academics as well. The less sleep you get, unfortunately, the more negatively your academics are impacted because, again, that Rem sleep period and sleep overall is when your brain is kind of sorting and organizing the information that it may have learned over the course of that day. So those kids that are doing that homework may not really be worth it anyway because they're not getting the sleep they need. I included these because they are, again, pretty dramatic when you look at the impact of sleep. So the graph on the left talks about teens with low stress are more likely than teens with high stress to say they get enough sleep. So teens that say they don't have high stress, 90% of them report getting enough sleep, whereas teens with high stress, only half of them. That's a massive difference. We see similar things on the right table, but instead of stress, this is feelings of irritability, anxiousness, depression, feeling overwhelmed, which are things we hear our students talk about all the time. So some of the benefits, so these are from studies from Colorado, Connecticut, Kentucky, Minnesota, across urban and rural, wealthy and less wealthy areas, in looking at districts that have done things like this and what have been the outcomes. So we found increased attendance rates, decreases in tardiness, dramatic decreases in disciplinary action, increases in student attention, decrease in sleepiness during the day. 92% of parents in one study said that their students were easier to live with. So that's the increase in student-family interaction. Increase in GPA and standardized test scores. One of the other components with disciplinary action is those risk behaviors we talked about. There's 8 to 15% less nicotine use, alcohol use, marijuana use, sexual activity. So this brings us to what quite a few organizations are kind of banding together to argue. So the CDC, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, National Sleep Foundation, and various others have made recommendations to suggest that kids at middle school and high school should not start school before 8:30. So for us, that is Novi Middle School and Novi High School. K to 6, the reason that they would not be part of this recommendation is that students at that point have not shifted to that sleep phase delay and therefore are not as negatively impacted. In fact, there are some studies suggesting that elementary schools early can be a better impact. So, brief? That's pretty good.
Relatively.
That was pretty good. That's Mr.
It was
Cole.
good. And this information is available on the public board book too, so
Yes.
if people want to reference it. And I do appreciate, we just want to comment, Andy, you sent us a Google Doc with a lot of additional research, so I appreciate that because I've certainly been reading some of my own, so it's nice to see what we're looking at.
So Ms. Minnick will now kind of summarize and review some of the frequently asked questions.
Yes, and I want to just point out too that, as Dr. Matthews mentioned, we were charged with this task of looking at bell times in order to align to the research, but there are a number of constraints. And so our recommended bell times try to minimize those negative impacts of increased costs or impacts on after-school activities, those kinds of things. But the recommendation that the committee is proposing, as shown on the screen, Novi Meadows to start at 7:30, Novi High School to start at 8, Novi Middle School to start at 8:30, and all Novi Elementaries to start at 9 o'clock. As Mr. Coe mentioned, the research points to a school start time for middle school and high school at 8:30. And the committee felt that an 8:30 start time at the high school level had greater negative impacts on after-school activities, part-time jobs, what have you, at that age level than at the middle school level. So at that point, we plugged in the high school to an 8 o'clock start and the middle school to the 8:30 start. That leaves Novi Meadows and the elementaries to either start earlier than 8 or later than 8:30 in order to utilize the resources that we have without purchasing more and so forth. So that resulted in the recommendation for Meadows to start at 7:30 and the elementaries to start at 9, which kept the elementaries somewhat at their current start times, but creating an equity among those elementaries by having all of them start at the same time. But with that, on the same slide, we've identified advantages and then some drawbacks and concerns. So I will go right into those drawbacks and concerns because the committee has reviewed each of those points, and I want to elaborate on those. And then I'll go into some of the concerns and questions and comments that we've seen in our emails and in the survey responses. So for the drawback of the fact that it's not compliant with an 8:30 start recommendation for the high school, I just explained that. The concern of younger students at bus stops in the dark. To alleviate this concern and to still keep the high school and the middle school near the 8 or 8:30 start times, either Meadows and elementaries would need to start at either 9 or 9:30. We felt with a 9:30 start time, that would be resulting in a very late afternoon dismissal and would impact student activities at school or outside of school, church activities or dance clubs or what have you that students are participating in part-time jobs. After-school activity schedules may be impacted, athletic schedules. Practice times at the middle school may be shortened because of in order to maintain our current late bus run. There may be scheduling conflicts with non-school activities in the late afternoon, such as some of the activities we just mentioned, orthodontic appointments, all kinds of things the committee considered, honestly. And then the late bus transportation. We determined that the late bus route could remain intact, but if the bus route were moved to a later time in order to accommodate equal shift in that later dismissal time of the middle school, it would likely result in difficulty in staffing those routes to attract those bus drivers because our bus drivers would be coming in the morning between 6 and 6:30 and then run those morning routes and then returning and potentially staying until 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening on a regular basis. So that stretches that workday to quite a length for our drivers. Some other concerns. Initially, we had talked about dismissal times at Novi Meadows and the high school may cause conflict for busing, but we have examined that and we do not anticipate conflicts there. Costs for athletic transportation. On occasion, due to scheduling conflicts with field trips or other types of transportation or a lack of drivers, maybe we have some drivers that are ill, we do rely on third-party vendors to provide, on occasion, certain athletic or field trip routes. So reducing that number of bus routes from 5 tiers to 4 may create, on occasion, a few more scheduling conflicts and potentially resulting in more outsourcing of certain routes to third-party vendors. We also wanted to be sure that we addressed any changes or impacts to our bus drivers, salaries and benefits and so forth, and we determined that with this schedule, there would be no loss of drivers' hours, and we do not think that the change in those bell schedules would impact the opportunity to attract new drivers or impact their availability to drive those routes. So some additional questions and answers. A question was raised, do we have enough buses and drivers to transport all elementaries at the same time? And the answer is yes, we do if we enforce the current walk zones. So to move to this recommended bell time schedule, the district's walk zone policy would need to be enforced to allow for enough buses and drivers, and that policy calls for a walk zone of 1.5 miles. We would be looking to enforce a 1 mile walk zone rather than the 1.5. We would look at 1.5 for the middle school and the high school as well. At the high school, 1.5. The district currently has homes within a 1 mile radius that receive transportation, and that's why we would need to enforce the current walk zones. Deerfield and Novi Middle School specifically currently transports students who live on the west side of Wixom Road because of safety concerns historically of the speed of traffic and the volume of traffic on Wixom Road. But just recently, the city installed a crosswalk and a traffic light near the entrance of Deerfield. And so with those in place, and with a current request to the city of Novi that is still pending to create a reduced speed zone, school speed zone area on Wixom Road, and perhaps with a cross guard, working collaboratively with the city of Novi, we feel that those facets would make it a safe passage from the west side of Wixom to the east side of Wixom Road. Additionally, there are 2 neighborhoods in the Village Oaks residential area and 1 in the Parkview residential area that are currently within the walk zone, but we currently transport. Another question, could we add more buses to keep the current walk zones? And the answer is yes, we could. We could add more buses. We could purchase those buses. But we believe we would have difficulty attracting bus drivers. There's a bus driver shortage. We've had a bus driver shortage for a number of years. And so we think it would be difficult to hire additional staff. But enforcing those walk zones across the district would create equity for those who receive transportation and those who need to walk. So what are some of our peer districts' walk zones? Most of them have 1 mile walk zones. Some do have 1.5 miles. Do we have enough buses and drivers to transport all the elementaries and athletics in the afternoon? Or will we need to pay a third party? And I spoke to that a little bit. The answer still remains that we can, but there may be some scheduling conflicts where we may have to utilize those third-party vendors. So then what are the dismissal times of other schools in the KLAA? How does that impact athletics? We discovered that out of the 16 high schools in the KLAA, the latest dismissal times are 3 schools who dismiss at 2:25 or 2:30. So a dismissal time of 2:44 would be later than all the other schools in the KLAA. And we will speak to athletics a little bit more later. How many buses and drivers would we need to add in order to transport Meadows and the middle school at the same start and end times? We estimate that it would require about 20 to 25 additional buses and drivers, plus some additional substitutes for that one tier. One tier of about 25 buses twice per day at about $100,000 cost for each bus equates to about $2.5 million in buses, which is a bond-eligible purchase, so we could use our new bond money toward that purchase. But in the course of labor, in order to attract that number of drivers, we would estimate that 25 drivers, 2 hours a day, which would be about 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, multiplied by their currently hourly rate and retirement and FICA, times the number of school days, would total approximately $250,000 annually, plus fuel and maintenance costs. Now, we may have to entice drivers with a higher rate of pay, and that can be done. If we assign more than one tier to those drivers to be sure that they want to work more than 2 hours a day, we determined that would reduce the number of hours afforded other drivers, and then we may be in a position of losing drivers because the number of hours would not be maintained.
Could I stop you for just 1 second?
Sure.
Just for clarification, while the buses can come out of the bond purchase, the salaries for the bus drivers would come out of the general fund, which is the classroom dollars, correct?
That's correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, I appreciate that. And do we even have enough room for additional buses at the bus depot? Is that what we call it? No. Okay. I know we're kind of landlocked there, so thought that had come up before. So I apologize for interrupting you. I
No,
just wanted to make sure
thank you.
that was clear.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Combs alluded to this a little bit, but what does the research say for elementary and Meadows bell times? So research indicates that the youngest students fare better academically and emotionally, mentally at the earliest times. Yet concerns of our elementary students at bus stops in the dark in the early hours raised a lot of comments and concerns in our survey responses. So that's why the committee identified that as a drawback or a concern, having Meadows be at the bus stops for a 7:30 start time. Many survey responses expressed concern, too, for Meadows students who may be home in the afternoon unsupervised as a result of that earlier dismissal. However, we noted there were several survey responses supporting the elementaries to start at the earliest time of 7:30, which we didn't expect. A lot of parents made comments that their little ones are ready to go early in the morning, and taking them to school would be in their best interest. So it would be feasible with our current buses and drivers to swap Meadows from 7:30 to the elementary 9 o'clock time. We could swap those, but again, it results in that concern for the even younger students being out at the bus stops earlier in the morning and in the dark in the winter. What about parents of elementary students whose work schedules conflict with the new times? Will they have to now purchase morning care or purchase alternate child care solutions? And we acknowledge that if parents' work schedules or other commitments conflict with the new school times, yes, they may have to find child care solutions. Alternately, there may be some current parents paying for care that with the new start times, it may alleviate. their need for childcare. Some may need to find childcare as a result of the changed dismissal times as well, or they may find that they no longer need that childcare at the end of the day, depending on their unique circumstances. Will there need to be some early releases for high school students participating in athletics, particularly in the spring, and especially for those competitions at schools that are farther away from Novi? And there may be likely an occasional dismissal early for certain students that participate in certain sports that are competing at certain schools far from Novi. If the high school day starts later, can student meetings or activities now be scheduled prior to the start time of the high school, early in the morning? And the committee would recommend that the district not permit those events to happen before the start of school. Otherwise, we are negating the purpose of shifting the start times. If high school students can wake up early, won't they just stay up later? And the committee cannot answer to families' choices of bedtimes, but the district can answer to providing the opportunity and the environment of promoting emotional and mental well-being by aligning our school start times with research findings. A concern was expressed repeatedly in the survey responses regarding the swing in the start times. So specifically, if we have a fourth grader at the elementaries that are starting at 9 o'clock, and the next year they move to Meadows, and now they're starting at 7:30 in the morning, that's an hour and a half swing. And then 2 years later, they're moving to the middle school in 7th grade and starting at 8:30. And there were concerns expressed about that. So how can that be mitigated? In all cases, in order to align the high school and the middle school with that recommended 8:30 time, the least amount of impact to those after-school activities and bus driver hiring and retention rates, the committee does recommend starting the high school at 8 and the middle school at 8:30. And I mentioned that we could swap the Meadows times with the elementary times. Something that is also feasible is to have the elementaries or Meadows start at 9 and then the others start at 9:30. But again, we're getting into a very late dismissal time in the afternoon, which the committee thought would have even more negative impacts. We also noted a common concern. It was a common thread expressed by parents of students that are currently in the elementary. They have one in the elementary, and then they also have another at Meadows. And they felt that the spread of an hour and a half from 7:30 to 9, trying to get their students out the door is too long of a duration in the house, and it's inconvenient too. It would just be difficult to get the students off to school with such a widespread in age groups that close. Those are the common themes and most frequently asked questions that we received as an administration. And so I would open it up to other comments, further discussion, other concerns you may have. I would welcome our committee members if it's regarding a particular department or activity, we can all share in those responses.
Okay, great. Is there someone that would like to start? Thank you, Mr. Mena.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Minnick.
Can I make a suggestion? Because does everybody have several questions? Okay, then go ahead. Just shoot, fire away.
I was just trying to scratch off. I know you were covering a lot of the things that I was going to ask. I'm not quite sure if you talked about it, but there was some concern about those kids who attend the Open School Technical Center in the afternoon and how that'll affect their ability to participate in those programs. Has that been discussed?
We have been discussing that, and I apologize, I didn't mention that as part of our concerns. There has been a conversation that we've been having with Sarah Leppert, too, at the high school, and other administrators, and that's an answer we just don't have quite yet. So we are exploring that. We want to be sure that we don't put students in a position of losing any educational time. We want to be sure we don't lose any FTE in our pupil count. There's a whole host of factors. We want to be sure that the opportunities at that center are still available fully to our students with any kind of bell change. So we're still exploring that and determining those answers.
I'm just
I
curious.
think the commitment is to try to figure out a solution to that, because we know that that's a meaningful experience for a number of students.
But how's the timing going to work? I think you're asking the board to approve this on the 19th.
Right.
So are we going to have?
We hope to kind of have an answer to that question between now and the 19th.
Okay. So what happens if the answer is, our kids can't participate in open schools technical centers next year because our schedule doesn't allow it. Is there a backup plan for that?
If we get that answer, we would figure out a backup plan. We'd figure out the solution, because we know that's a meaningful educational experience for our students, and we don't want them to miss out on that opportunity. We haven't gotten that answer yet, so we haven't explored alternative answers, but we are trying to figure out. It may mean that we swap, morning for afternoon. There are some options that we're looking at, but we understand that's something that we need to make sure that we continue to offer to our students who participate in that program.
Can you also talk again, I know you touched on cost. Can you elaborate again on what you feel the total cost of this change will be? I know there's fixed costs with regards, well, I should say fixed and additional costs with regards to having to purchase additional buses, but there's additional labor costs as well. So if somebody were to ask me, what is this thing going to cost Novi Schools, what would the answer be approximately?
Well, let me clarify, because I may have been unclear in the delivery of the cost information. To implement the schedule that we have recommended, there would be no need to purchase additional buses or hire additional staff. Any costs that may be involved would be the occasional third-party vendor that might have to step in for a field trip or an athletic run, those kinds of things. Where the cost would come into play is if we wanted to try to run Meadows and middle school at the same time, or high school and middle school at the same time, because we cannot accommodate that many students with the buses we have at the same time. So that's where the additional cost would come in. If we were to, as an example, if we were to try to run Meadows at the same time as middle school, let's say, and both have start times at 8:30, Meadows right now, I believe, has 26 runs. So we would need to purchase that many more buses, hire that many more drivers in order to run what we would call that one tier of transportation for that building. So an estimate of a bus in general on average might be $100,000. The last buses we purchased were about $90,000, but if any of those would need to be lift buses or what have you, the cost would increase. So 25 buses at about $100,000, just for easy math, would be about $2.5 million. On the labor side, if we were to hire 25 drivers, we anticipate that might be an hour in the morning and then an hour in the afternoon, so 2 hours per day, with currently 180 days of school. An average bus driver hourly rate would be about $18 an hour, $18.50, just on average. And so when you multiply that through, plus cost for retirement and FICA, which is about 50% of that hourly rate, you arrive at a total cost for 1 year of about $250,000 for labor, which would be out of the general fund. So then what the impact would be, though, is that if we had drivers run that one tier, a couple of things would happen. It may be very difficult to find drivers who would just drive 1 hour in the morning and then come back later in the day to drive 1 hour in the afternoon. I think that would be difficult to staff. So to solve that, if we were to give those drivers a few more of the other routes, then we're taking away hours from the other drivers who are currently on average working 6 hours a day, which affords them benefits and things like that. So we want to be sure we're not harming any current drivers and reducing those available hours and being sure that we're able to attract drivers. There is a bus driver shortage. The solution to that could be posting higher wages for our drivers. That may or may not attract drivers. The work of a bus driver is challenging, and it's a split shift. It's time in the morning, and then you return for time in the afternoon. Should we raise drivers' rates in order to be competitive? I don't know what the fallout would be with our neighboring districts or other communities. That may or may not be a consideration. So the increased costs would be if we wanted to run our larger schools at the same time. That's what we would not be able to accommodate.
And you mean larger in terms of the number of kids that ride the bus?
Yes, yes.
Right, because the elementary schools are local. So even though we have more elementary students, we have less that need transportation than we do for Meadows or the middle school.
Yes. And Ms. Valentine, if you want to add on to what I'm going to say, but we want to be able to think of our routes a little bit differently, as our parent had mentioned. Think of those a little bit differently in terms of geographic location and maybe stagger some buildings, maybe if we have to, a little bit in order to accommodate some of those runs, but we don't anticipate a lot of that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Trustee?
You did, thank you. Well, if you want me to continue, okay, because I think I have two more questions. With regards to care, I think there was some concerns about the availability of care, and I haven't really figured out the hours yet. There was some concern about whether or not care would be available for those folks who would need it
Oh.
now based on these changes. Can you speak to that again
Sure,
about
and-
how,
Please, if you would prefer, yeah. Ms. Hanson will address your question.
Thank you. So, based on the
Introduce yourself
hi,
for
I'm
the
Ann-
millions of listeners.
I'm Ann Hansen. I'm the director of early childhood and care services. I don't think care is going to be affected. 3 of the elementary schools already start at 9 o'clock, so the other 2 will just start at that time as well. So we would still be offering morning and afternoon care for all 5 elementaries, and we currently offer it at Meadows. I saw on the survey somebody thought we didn't offer it, but we do. We call it PT Club because the older kids don't want it to be called care. So we'll still be able to offer that service for all those schools.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
Do we have capacity issues at all?
So sometimes we'll hear from parents saying, there's a wait list. It's not this year especially. It's not because of staffing, but we really do reach capacity for the program. So sometimes we have outside services that pick up some of our kids too. So we have a small wait list right now in some of our elementaries, but we try and get everybody in that we can. Like Meadows, we have almost all of our schools, we have over 100 registrations per care program. So we'll always probably have that problem. I think all districts do. They can't provide the service for every student. We just take as many as that we can. But
So you don't anticipate that there will be a tremendous change
No.
in the amount of availability?
with staffing and everything like that, no, I don't think. It really will very little affect the care program. And our early childhood center, we're just going to be able to keep our times as is based off of, we were always trying to avoid the Meadows traffic and also Parkview, and so we're still going to be fine with our times. And we stagger our classes to kind of accommodate families that need to get to work a little bit earlier and some that come a little bit later too, so we should be fine.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Do you have other questions?
Last
Go
one
ahead.
for now. Dr. Matthews, as you know, many high schools, including are constantly reevaluating our high school schedule. And when I mean schedule, I'm not talking about start time, I'm talking about the actual scheduling during the day. Will this new time handcuff our ability to make changes in the future? Or do you see the start and end time really having no effect on maybe some potential block changes that we might want to consider in the future?
I would, we're not reducing the number of hours that students are in the school. And so I don't see the changing of start times having a negative effect on conversations that we might have about changing the actual structure of the high school day. Those conversations can still continue. The plan would be next year in 2020, 2021 for us to run the same 6-period day that we currently have. But Ms. Carter is continually facilitating conversations among the high school staff about, is there a better structure to the actual day? And those conversations certainly could continue. And I don't think changing the start time would have an impact on those discussions.
Thank you.
Other board members? Do you have any?
I had a question about the logistics that hold 25 buses, but Mrs. Minnick.
She answered it. Great. Dr. Ruskin, do you have any questions that didn't get addressed?
No, I think that most of my questions did get addressed. I did ask for the KLA start and end times, which was provided, and that's great. It does look like our end time is one of the earliest at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So bumping it up makes us one of the latest, but we're really not that far off. We're off by 20 minutes potentially.
Right, 15 to
and
20 minutes.
It looks like, I know that Mrs. Hood looked at the local Catholic schools in the area and their bell times, and their end times are even later than we would anticipate for our students. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith, do you have any questions that did not already get addressed?
Am I allowed to make a comment or just a
Certainly, certainly.
question? I have both, actually.
Okay.
Dr. Weber, I might ask you to provide some insight, but on Tuesday evening, I sat at the meeting for the Novi Youth Assistance from the vice chair, and we were talking with our caseworker, and we noticed that there has not been any referrals from the middle school or the high school to Novi Youth Assistance for vaping offenses. And I thought that was odd that it was 0. But I went home that night and I sat with my senior and my sophomore at the high school and my 8th grader. And I asked all 3 of them over dinner, tell me about your experience. Do you really find that you don't want to use the restroom at school because there's vaping? And all of them said no. They actually looked at me like, no, it's not really an issue. And there's a lot of comments on our Facebook page about, oh my gosh, there's kids that don't want to use the bathroom because of vaping. And all 3 of my kids said that they don't find that experience. Actually, my senior said, Dad, the real issue is going into the bathroom and seeing kids crying. And then my sophomore said the same thing. And then Thomas, Mr. Baker told me that there's a boy that eats his lunch in the restroom at the middle school. And my heart broke. You know, Thomas said he invited the boy to sit with him at lunch. But it was a reminder. And then my 17-year-old said, well, Dad, you want to see what happened at Northville happen here? I said, well, honey, I think that girl committed suicide last year. And she said, well, there was another one this year. And she finally has a boyfriend who goes to U of D. They've lost 3 kids this year. Is it going to take a loss of life for us to implement what is going to be in the best interest of our kids? I don't care if a parent has to get care. I don't care if they have to talk to their boss about going into work 30 minutes later. Some of these comments were preposterous. So this is a life and death thing. So I don't know if we need to look into the cost of erecting streetlights, Cindy. I don't know how many bus stops there are, but, you know, there's ways to get around. In the neighborhoods I live in, the parents are sitting there and the kids with the car waiting for the bus. So, you know, don't tell me about it. And it's not like 2 cars. So the 1 mile thing's not an issue. I took my kids back to Grand Rapids and we clocked I had a 2.3 mile walk to the bus stop to catch a city bus. So, you know, Thomas walks home, you know, to his mom's when he goes to middle school. So this is a bigger issue than babysitting and job start times. And I hope we will address that. That's all.
Thank you. I would like to add something to that now that Mr. Smith took off on that rant. Well, and it's a good one. It's important. So it's. I don't mean to make light of it. Because there were 2, so there have been lots and lots of comments on Hometown Life and Facebook and the neighborhood. What's the neighborhood one? Next door. And 2 things jumped out at me, which as a parent, I mean, we're all parents. I have 2 boys, both in college, so I'm not that far removed from, you know, shaking them to get out of bed by 6:45 so they could get in their car by 7 and make it to the parking lot by probably 7:14 on a lot of mornings. But there were some comments, and I don't think they were from Novi parents, that said, well, this teaches them what the real world is like. And then there was one comment in the Hometown Life, and this man was not from Novi, he was from up north, but he said something about kids being snowflakes. And I note some indignance from Mr. Smith, and I felt the same way. These are kids, and our kids are not snowflakes, whatever that means. They work hard, they are conscientious, and it is our job to support them and do what is right for our kids. And so I just wanted to maybe pile on to what Mr. Smith said a little bit. So thank you. And I wanted to thank really our committee who has done so much work, and you have gone back and forth on the objections and the supports and all of that just to kind of nail this up. So thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Okay. Can I, one of the other comments that I noticed on there was just that if we're going to do this and 8:30 is the recommended start time, why would we not? And I know you did address that to a certain extent. It does appear that the research, and I don't know if there's other research that I haven't looked at, Mr. Coleman's not here. Okay, well,
He had,
maybe one of the others of you have read the research, just in terms of, it says there's incremental improvement in those areas with an 8 o'clock start time.
well, I'll take the first stab at this.
Sure.
Because my sons went to another high school in the area, and they started at 8 o'clock and didn't get out till 3 o'clock. And my middle son participated in spring sports. During spring sports, he would routinely miss 3 out of 5 days in seventh period because they had to leave early to get to the athletic event at a school that was some miles away from the high school that he attended. And in my view, starting at 8:30, that would get us out at 3:15. So we would have students that would routinely miss, especially in the spring, multiple days a week of their 6-hour class. And so I don't view that as beneficial either.
Right.
And so as I said earlier, there is no perfect schedule. The research is pretty clear that they think 8:30, but I think moving it back to 45 minutes would provide us with benefit. And if we, after 2 years, it clearly shows that it's not providing the amount of benefit that we think, we could then try to figure out how to make an 8:30 work. But I think this would be a good first
Well,
effort.
I see two things maybe happening here, and this is more of a comment maybe than it is a question. But certainly I know there's other districts that have been looking at this. Plymouth Canton, I got a call from one of their school board members not that long ago because they were doing some research and looking into it. He was a physician at Beaumont and wanted to know kind of what some of our dialogue had been at that point, which had been minimal at that point. But certainly I was aware of a lot of the research around it. And so I had a very good conversation with him because they were really looking at that as well. So I'd love to see the movement start for all kids. Obviously, I love our Novi kids and love this community school district, and certainly I would not want us to wait until things get so bad for our kids. And I do know that they're getting worse. I think that's very well documented, that I think if we're gonna call our kids snowflake, it's because they're beautiful and unique and not for any other reason. And the truth is that we need to honor them. And I know it's gonna mean sacrifice for a lot of different people, and we have to decide if our students are worth that. And certainly I don't want to see our kids have opportunities pulled away because we're moving in that direction, because that's certainly something that we've all as a board said we want to continue to offer those opportunities, but we certainly don't want it to be at the cost of their wellness and their well-being, because that is not a good trade-off.
And in the vein of what Dr. Matthews was saying is, if we implement this and after maybe 2 years we decide it's not optimal, we can move away from it. Yet in those 2 years, we may find that other neighboring districts continue to adjust their schedules as well, and then those conflicts may dissolve.
Right. And
Certain
I
conflicts may
actually grew up in Ohio. The state to the south.
The state that is beneath us.
The state to the south. And we did start late, and they still start late.
Yeah,
So there's school districts across the country that have a much different start time. I mean, I haven't looked at the research on their mental health, but clearly they would have been included in some of this other research.
And I think they have robust sporting
Yes, they do.
programs in Ohio.
Yes, and Dr. Ruskin.
So I just wanted to thank the committee. I think that you guys have done a fabulous job, and it's not easy. As you can see, there's all this, that, what ifs, how can we, everybody has their own ideas and their own, as Tom pointed out, logistical concerns. But I just encourage, when you're out there talking to people and getting their feedback, and we as a board, as Tom was brave enough to point out, what our directive is to take care of our kids here in this district. And many of the comments were not on the research. I'm not sure that everybody actually understood the backbone of this, because there was many comments about Novi Meadows and their start times, and versus realizing that the research is based on kids between the ages of 12 and 18 years old. And that is how this fit into this these parameters. And so although we don't want to make life difficult for our community members and to put our kids, at the bus stops early, we are making decisions, and the committee made these recommendations based on the research. So I would encourage the community to really look at what's being said here, and that the research should be what we're talking about in the decision in our kids' mental health. And all the other stuff is important, and we do respect our parents' time, but our kids are our snowflakes. I think that's great. We're all just going to call them snowflakes. And it's interesting. My personal situation is my kids are not for this at all, but I've had conversation with them that this isn't about them. This is about the overall experience here in Novi for all kids, and that someday they're going to not be here, and we need to make decisions proactively for the future, and they're just going to have to live with it. So those are the conversations at my house.
Thank you.
I promise one brief follow-up. Okay. Jill, has the committee come up with a recommendation on whether or not to swap Meadows and the elementary school?
We have kept our proposal as is.
Okay, so you've talked about it, you still think what you've come up with is better? Okay.
Is that a yes?
Yes,
Or
primarily because the elementaries would have less change. It's kind of keeping at least some of the buildings.
so it impacts
as is.
fewer
fewer families.
a few less families to move that elementary time. Well, certainly there'll be some ongoing questions if we have them for the committee, and certainly if you guys, after reading more and more of the survey results, have some additional things you want to share with us, I would encourage you to get that information to us in a timely fashion. And we do have 2 board members that are not here this evening. I would anticipate you might hear a few things from them as a result of the discussion too, and additional questions before our meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you, really, for presenting, for all of you for being here again to have this conversation with us. Change is hard. I think we all know that that can be a hard thing, but it's also sometimes necessary. So I think we need to be, like you said, focused on the research and what is best for our kids, and keep our focus there. And that is certainly what I think we've all been elected to do. So so thank you also to all the parents that responded to multiple avenues and giving us a lot of different feedback. I mean, I did go through and highlighted things and made some notes of my own. You've done a very good job of addressing them. I had one suggestion about having frequently asked questions someplace.
Right. On the website.
On the
We'll work
website
on that.
to address that, because I know that even in some of the surveys, there weren't people that had an opinion, they had questions. And then my one other follow-up is some of them put their emails in there for additional follow-up. Is there someone that's tackling that?
Miss Holly and I are gonna tackle that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we pay attention to that and get back with them with answers to questions or any additional information, so.
We do have, if I've heard right, one important follow-up, which is the OTEC piece that we need to get an answer to. And that will, Ms. Valentine and Ms. Minnick and I will work together to make sure that we get the board an answer. We'll work with the high school to figure that out as well, because we do want our students to continue to have access to that opportunity. We also would encourage parents to come to our Coffee with the Superintendent this coming Wednesday at 10:15 at the Novi Public Library. We have a new Starbucks area that you can purchase your coffee, because I fail always to bring coffee, but we would encourage you to come and share comments with
Should be
us.
coffee cup with the superintendent.
Ms. Minnick and Mr. Combe will be there as part of that to kind of talk about the proposal and answer questions and to provide feedback as well. We will, Ms. Valentine, Ms. Minnick and I will continue to look at, is there an option for collapsing, as the parent mentioned, picking up multiple groups of kids, multiple grade levels, and to see if there is an option, and we would provide that information to the board before our next meeting. But the intent is that we would come to you at our next meeting with a recommendation that we would ask the board to approve. And the reason that we want early action on this is that we would then have all of the first part of 2020 to communicate, to solve problems, to make sure that everybody is aware of how we are going to start school next year. And that would give us 9 months to do that. And as we all know, it's critically important that we communicate often early and often so that parents can plan ahead. And that would include helping Ms. Hanson with care to figure out when's the right time to get information out to parents so that they can reserve spots and all those kinds of things. So that's why we're coming to the board at this time, because we want to give as much time as possible to our community to plan ahead.
Okay, I do have one other question that came up in the survey. If our teachers or our staff have already put in for the flexible, I think it's like a flexible spending for healthcare, and they have a fixed amount and they may need more, is that something that can subsequently be adjusted for them for that next year?
Do you mean to say if they want to add to their contributions to their HSA plan?
Yes.
For the child care?
For the child care.
Oh, yes, the dependent care, absolutely. I will look into that. Thank you for that
So
question.
if you could follow up with that, because I know that was on a few of the staff's
Thank you.
concerns, just that they have already put in for that, and I think that would be wise
Okay.
to address that.
If
And
we can give them the option of contributing.
yeah, certainly, and as you're continuing to look at this, I mean, obviously you've got what you believe is a solid recommendation. I too was surprised that parents were saying, send our youngest kids early, but like you
Yes.
said, most of them are at the bus stop. I walk my dog most mornings while the elementary schools, and they are parents, a lot of parents out there with their kids. Well, I haven't seen a lot in their cars in my neighborhood. They're out there with their
Certain neighborhoods, there
younger
are quite a
children,
few cars.
stuff like that. So we're hardy. We're hardier. Anyways,
Well, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank the board for this opportunity to explore this, even just to start exploring it and having those conversations, to have a candid conversation and really acknowledge all of the different concerns and changes that come along with this type of a bell schedule change. So I thank the committee for all their hours. There were a number of folks who really put in a lot of time in research and calculations and logistics and you name it. We tried to consider every angle. We had representation from every grade level and every student group, and we really had some great conversations. So I thank you for this opportunity to present it to you
okay.
for your consideration. Thank you.
Is there anything else before we let Jill step down away from the podium? Thank you. You did a very good job of walking through all those. I know there were a lot of responses. There's 18 pages that I actually printed out. There may be more at this point that have come in
And we'll provide that to them.
since then, so we'll get more copies of that.
And we're happy to answer additional questions as
Okay,
mentioned.
so we'll
Thank
just get those questions sent through to Dr. Matthews like we did this time. And, if there's answers or responses that you can get out. And then if there are also frequently asked questions, certainly, let's get those on the website so that we are communicating early and often.
you. Very good.
Fantastic. So we will look forward to more information. And next, this will come back to us at the meeting on the 19th.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I got to go back to agenda. Oh, this is another opportunity for comments from the audience. So if anyone in the audience would like to address the board on it, and this doesn't have to be about what we've talked about this evening. It could be about anything within our jurisdiction that you would like to comment.
Swivel chair.
Okay, so, that we do have someone. Just make sure you fill out a green card, Mr. Smith, and give it to Mrs. Holly. And introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jason Smith. My wife and I are proud parents of an 8th grader at the middle school. Before I make any comments, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who sits around the table. I appreciate your service to our students every day. Thank you to the committee who worked on this research. As a small business owner, I have the opportunity to work with many high school students from many different high schools. I reached out to 9 of them today, and I asked them 2 questions. What time does your school start? What time do you go to bed? North Farmington, we start at 7:45, I go to bed at 11. Farmington, we start at 7:45, 3 answers. I go to bed at midnight, I go to bed at 1 if I have a lot of homework, and I go to bed at 12:30. Mercy, 3 answers. We start at 8 o'clock, I go to bed at 11, I go to bed at 11:30, I go to bed between 1 and 1:30. St. Catherine's, we start at 7:40, I go to bed at 11 on a good night, and that's because I try to do all my homework that I can the weekend before, that way I can go to bed early. So 11 o'clock is early for her. as executive director of the Novi Educational Foundation, I also have the great opportunity to work with some high school students here at Novi. Obviously, I know what time they start high school. I ask them the question, what time do you go to bed? It varies, anywhere from midnight to 3 a.m. 12 to 1, occasionally I wake up early rather than stay up late to do my homework. I usually go to bed around 11. I then wake up at 2 or 3 if I have a lot of homework. I go to bed somewhere around midnight, and the last one, it usually varies anywhere between midnight and 2 a.m. So I am in favor of a later start time for the high school, but I think that's just one step that we need to look at. We also need to look at, why are our kids staying up till midnight, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? Is it amount of homework? Is it the classes that they take? Is it the pressure that they're feeling to get into a university? Is it the pressure from their parents? Is it the pressure from themselves? I don't know what the answers are, but I applaud the research. I applaud even looking into a later start time for high school students. Our son today gets up at 6:30 in the morning for 8th grade. We start the process at 6:15. He gets up at 6:30. As I'm walking up the stairs for the third time, I already see the high school kids outside waiting for the bus at 6:30. I know what kind of issues I'm in for next year to try to get him up even that much earlier. But so I think this would be a step in the right direction, but we're not finished. Let's figure out how our kids can get to bed earlier and not be penalized for their high school years or even after. So thank you. I appreciate your time and again your service to our district.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Okay, if you could just fill out a green card and give it to Mrs. Halley and just approach the podium. Yep.
So my name is Kristen Hoy, and I have 2 high school students in the district. And like everybody else before me, I do thank everybody for their time and energy, and this is obviously a very passionate subject, and we just appreciate everybody listening and listening to all the different stakeholders, and very much appreciate you giving us the opportunity today as parents to share what we're hearing from our perspective. My main concern is with the extracurricular activities. My kids are involved in sports and music. I have a swimmer. She has to be at the high school at 5:15 in the morning for practice. She wants to actually keep the start time at school the way it is because, and this is a question I have, she's heard that if we go to the later start times, there will not be any before school activities, be it for like a 0-hour, TOC, swim, or whatnot. And that's a big concern of hers because she'd like to beat Northville. And Northville is going to continue having their before school practices, right? Which leads to my next point of, and I think Ms. Minnick mentioned this, we would be perhaps Novi NCSD going to the later start time, but our other schools, districts around here in KLAA, even Oakland County, or the state of Michigan are not, but maybe in a year or two, some others may. Do we need to go right now? Can we wait a little bit longer or talk with our neighbors or some of our KLAA partner districts to see if maybe many of us go at the same time, and then we'd all be impacted similarly and figure out the whole athletics of 5:15 in the morning swim. And then on the back end, we have, okay, I'll just hit it. The stadium. We have one stadium, obviously, at the high school. The new bond building hasn't been built yet. Lots of very important groups at the high school use that same stadium. And right now, you have, let's say, this much amount of time after school before whenever we have to get off the field. Let's say it's 9 o'clock at night. Right now is the latest when an activity ends. So if we start school later, we get out later, now you have this much time at that same scarce resource. Some groups are not getting ample time on that facility because of weather concerns or scheduling difficulties with other schools. Games get rescheduled on different days. Certain groups are getting really the shaft. And we're concerned that if you now have less time available in the stadium, then what happens? Does some group go instead of 6 to 9 p.m.? Now they're going 6:45 to 9:45 p.m. They get home at 10:15 at night. They take a quick shower, eat a quick dinner at 10:30 at night, and then they start their homework. I'm not sure if we're solving the real problem here. Like we addressed what was questioned earlier, the homework load, or, are we just shifting their little 4 hour of sleep window an hour later? And then impacting like the extracurricular activities where now we've got the stadium and making sure, if people are losing time, all the groups lose time. Similarly amount of time, not just one group losing and one group not losing. And once again, back to the swimming. So I'm rambling a little bit, but there's one swimming pool for the entire city, middle school and high school. That pool is very busy. So just like the stadium, you've got this pool, now you've got less time. And maybe there's not even morning practice for the high school team. Now they've got less time. You've got the Spartan swim group who is in there until 9 o'clock at night. So they're going to now not have a home for their swim team, and they have to find another pool. The pools all around here are busy, and there's no other place for them to go. So we're impacting our city as well. The Spartans have been swimming there for a long time. Or does our high school, middle school teams not have as much time for practice? Those are issues. And Dr. Matthews brought this one. Oh,
1 minute.
1 minute. Thank you, Willie. I have a concern with getting to after-school away competitions or events. I don't want my child missing 6 hours. That's not right. That's not solving our problem. That's a big problem, missing it 2-3 times a week. And a concern with staff supporting, like, let's say, our after-school activities. We understand we talked about the care, but will we have the swim coach for the morning or the afternoon? Now that we have a different schedule, they may not work at Novi, and so we may not have the staff that we need to support our extracurricular activities. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just make sure you get your green card to
I
Mrs.
will.
Holly. We appreciate that. And then maybe, yes, would you like to say something?
I want to add a clarifying comment.
Okay.
Earlier when I was addressing the Q&As of response concerns about students actually weighed in and said, can we still have our morning meetings and our before school activities? And I was remiss in not clarifying that we weren't speaking of athletics, more so the clubs and 0 hours and those types of things. As a committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we did talk about swim would be that one activity that would still occur before school. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean,
You know what, Mr. Gordon, you'll need to go to the podium so that we can get
But
your.
that doesn't give you unlimited time at the podium, by the way.
I'm the ever-expressive athletic director from Novi, Brian Gordon. On our swim teams, we have 70 to 80 kids, and our pool simply is not large enough to house all those kids. So what the swim team is doing, they're running split practices. And so some part of the team will go in the morning, the other part of the team goes in the afternoon. Spartans come in afterwards, and then we have some lap swimming. And so we would still need to run the morning program.
Okay.
It's simply because of the size of our team. And it's a non-cut sport, and we don't want to get into cutting kids in swimming. And so
But instead of
that's how we
5:15, it may be 6:15.
yeah, it'd be an hour later.
Okay. So
Yeah.
thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
I apologize, I wasn't clear in my question phrasing.
You didn't specify athletics, you just said the other thing, so I do appreciate that clarification, because that's kind of a big deal.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
all right. So, before we move on, is there anybody additionally that would like to address the board?
My name is Grace Holiday. I have 2 children, only one in the district right now. My daughter is in 4th grade at Orchard Hills, and next year the jump up will be a huge impact on her. Right now, she doesn't like me walking her to the bus. I can see the bus stop from my house, but I won't be able to in the dark. It's quite a few doors down. I have a little one, and bringing her to the bus stop, which she doesn't want me to do, I don't feel safe sending her in the dark. Is there a way to make sure that bus stops are moved closer to houses at least, to make sure that parents feel safe sending their children to the bus stops?
Those are certainly things that, with Ms. Valentine, we can try to figure out. The routing software, we would certainly try to mitigate some of those negative impacts.
Because we've also had reports in the area that there were men trying to talk to girls and have them come to their car in the arts, and that's near my neighborhood. I don't feel comfortable sending my 65-pound daughter out to the bus stop alone in the dark where I can't see her. That is a huge safety issue. It would force me to probably drive her, get my 1-year-old up, get him dressed, and drive her to school every day because I'm not going to put her in a dangerous situation.
So noted. All right. And just make sure you fill out a green card for us, okay? So that if we do need to follow up with you about anything, we have your information to do that. All right, anybody else is welcome to just jump on up to the podium. You don't have to be polite and wait for someone else to speak. Thank you. And likewise, just limit your comments to 5 minutes if you can.
Oh, it's only be a couple minutes.
Okay.
My name's Lucian Harbar. I have 2 children in the district. I've never been to one of these meetings before, so I don't really know how they work, things like that, just trying to understand it a little better. From what I've heard here tonight is there's a whole lot of things that we still need to talk about and a whole lot of things we still need to figure out. I don't know if we really want to rush and vote on this in 2 weeks and then try and figure it out in 9 months. I just like the board to consider maybe waiting a little bit longer and try and work out some of these details before we actually vote on this. I think we got a lot of things to consider here. That's all I've learned here tonight. And can I still put comments online and things like that?
Oh,
questions?
absolutely.
All right, I'll
Absolutely.
probably do that. Thank you very much.
And make sure you fill out a green card and give it to Mrs. Holly so that
Will
we
do.
have that for the record. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing no one, I just want to make sure. People have been pausing a little bit. We will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Dr. Kinzer, as was mentioned earlier, is not here this evening because he's on a special assignment investigating ideas for our District Goal 4, which is recruiting and hiring of staff. He will report back to the administrative team and also ultimately to the board after he returns. I would like to thank the board for their robust discussion this evening. I look forward to continuing this conversation with the board and hopefully making a decision so we can communicate to our parents and our students about school start times and what we will do for the 2021 school year. Tomorrow afternoon, starting about 3 o'clock, over 1,000 high school students from around Oakland County in the region will descend on Novi High School to participate in the HOSA Regional. I'd like to thank Emily Polanski and her band of intrepid helpers for creating this opportunity for our students. I also would like to encourage our community to come and support our bands, choirs, and orchestras as they perform this month. December 10th, we have the Winter Orchestra Concert at Novi High School. December 12th is the Winter Band Concert at Novi High School. December 13th is the Dance Collaboration Concert at Novi High School. And December 17th is the Winter Choir Concert at Novi High School. Middle school and the Meadows and the elementary buildings also are having concerts throughout the month of December. So I would encourage our parents to go and support their children in these activities. And that's my report this evening.
Great. Next are our administrative reports. I know you've talked a lot, Mrs. Medic, but maybe there's something else you'd like to share with us.
I'll just keep it brief and just thank you once again for the opportunity to do this research. And it's been enlightening for me to understand a little bit more about athletics and a little bit more about transportation and theater and all the other grade level assistant groups. So that's terrific to be able to work together and thank you for the consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
And
you did a great job tonight.
You did. Dr. Weber.
Hi, yes. So, Mr. Smith, you brought up something with a bit of passion there in your comments, and really the first couple things I'm going to speak about attend to that. So really think about this as a rundown of the past week in the district and a few highlights from each day. On Monday, the Novi Parent District Mental Health Collaborative Group, we meet on the first Monday of every month, changed our name to the Novi Mental Health Alliance. 20 months we've been meeting every Monday, and for those 20 months, Melissa Matson has led each one of those meetings. Melissa's my colleague. Out of that meeting, we meet many people who care about the well-being of our students and the well-being of our families. And one of the offshoots of that is actually a Parents Helping Parents group that's coming from that, where we are going to be supplying the community with a list of parents who are willing to stand in the breach a little bit, somebody you can call if you're dealing with a situation with your children. Out of that also came, on Tuesday, we hosted Mr. Jeff Edwards. And Mr. Edwards lost his son to suicide when his son was 12 years old. And he spoke with every administrator in the district, as well as a host of board members and parents. That really is the ultimate arbiter of any decision that you should make as a board member, that we should be making as administrators are. You know, what is truly best for our kids? It's that simple. And we have chosen professions, and you have chosen to run for board seats, where that has to be the first question we answer. Full stop. That's what we're here for. And the research on sleep is overwhelming on the mental health benefits that can occur from it. So perhaps Ms. Ruskin, perhaps or Dr. Ruskin would like to speak about Tuesday. On Wednesday, our students went to Lansing, 4 students from the Novi Meadows, for the Student Technology Showcase hosted by AT&T at our Capitol. And Principal John Brickey went with 4 Novi Meadows 6th graders and an eDo robot. As we know, each 6th grade student gets that experience. 35 hours of robotics training at our 6th grade space. Only school in North or South America that's able to do that right now. And rather than showing up with a pre-programmed robot, what he pushed our kids to do is actually build and write a program when they got there, right in the midst of everything. And they did it well. He was super proud of them. Also on that day, we had our 3rd grade guided reading professional development. So our literacy specialists, our instructional coaches, and our administrators led that. And that was each 3rd grade teacher in the district having training on how to better teach that fundamental concept of reading. And all one had to do was sit in that space for 15 minutes to realize how complicated the notion of teaching reading is in the best of circumstances. And I am very, very proud of our coaches and our literacy specialists, our administrators for going towards that. And of course, our teachers who are digging in and having the humility to get better. Today, at Novi Middle School, Rotary hosted their holiday celebration. Ms. Grabinski did a wonderful job of leading the choir. Principal Baker was there smiling and greeting folks. So this is the Novi seniors, not like 12th graders, like people like Mr. Smith's age from the community. Come on, I love you. Were there, and they were fed by our students, they were sung to by our students, they were loved by our students. And this is another example of how public schools are parts of our community, and oftentimes the community. We also had a social studies and English language arts curriculum construction. Mr. Combe, who you saw earlier tonight, very professorial in his beard and his hand gestures, did a great job with our teachers in 6th grade and really looking at how we're going to deliver that curriculum. And today I had the pleasure of attending the Japanese Business Society of Detroit grant celebration with Miss Adva Ringel, who's our supervisor of English language learners. And we received monies from JBSD to pay for translation in our schools. Also, Rengo Kai, the Japanese school, donated amounts of money to Novi Meadows and the high school out of gratitude for using those spaces. We have the 2nd largest Japanese school in the nation is here in Novi every Saturday. And then a really wonderful opportunity, well actually tomorrow I'll be going and meeting with the head of Kamau's Global Robotics and Education piece. They're coming in from Italy to give them feedback on the eDo experience, as well as see what else and other values they can provide for our community and our students. So I'm excited about that. On Monday, December 16th and 17th, we're hosting Miss Kathy Jory. She's a Senior Product Manager at Mozilla in Emerging Technologies. And I'm going to give you a rundown of what she's going to be doing with our kids. On the 16th, she will be meeting with Kim Wesner, our Media Specialist. And students will be signing up and visiting the collaboration room to visit with Kathy and learn from her. Kathy's background includes working for Arduino, Qualcomm. She, if you're familiar with coding, is very good friends with the people who invented Scratch and understands this world very much. She'll be then doing a lesson with students about Arduino and Raspberry Pi, with Ms. Sauter's STEM class. She'll be going to Mr. Miller's Computer Science and Media Technology, and she'll be doing a lesson with students on HTML coding. We're going to then head over to, this is amazing stuff, to Miss Wollstonecroft's media specialist, her class at Orchard Hills, in working with 4th grade students on Scratch coding, 4th graders. And then she's going to meet with our tech team at 3:15 and then wrap up. And then on Tuesday, coming up to that, she'll be at our 5th grade media center working with Mr. Todd Erickson, our media specialist, and working with 5th grade students on microbits. 6th grade, she'll be working with our robotics kids as well, Mr. Ernster. Then heading to the high school, working with Ms. Shapinski and her computer science classes. Then heading to the incubator class to work with our students there. Then she'll be hosting a huge event with Girls Who Code and Frog Force in the afternoon. And finally, I'd like to invite, once this opens up, my sense is these are going to go pretty quickly. We have 400 seats open, and the invite will be coming out for an evening of STEM equity and opportunity, developing a learning path for employability. And it's a panel discussion. And on that panel discussion, we'll have folks in hiring in the tech industry. We'll have Ms. Jory. We'll have one of our students, actually the young lady who put together the NEF-sponsored STEM event at Novi Meadows. We will also have Bhavani Kanaru, who is on our YES committee, is also and ran for the board. And she is, I believe, head of IT at Wayne State University. And we're very, very excited. I think as a parent and as parents, we're wondering what are the jobs that are out there, what are they? But an underlying piece is the tech industry, unfortunately, has a pretty notorious glass ceiling. And what we need to do way ahead of high school is help empower each of our students, especially our young ladies, that they are capable of anything in any field. And so the conversation that night will be led by Jeff Maas from Oakland Schools, and he will be developing the questions for that. We'll get more information out. Very excited. If you're wondering what lies in the future for your children and what we're trying to do to help them see that, we invite you to that night, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And what do you think of the chair?
I didn't realize it's
Really? So it's kind of nice. Much more support than those. So that's it. That was just this week, right?
Yeah.
It's exhausting, but it's great. It's great, and I can't wait to hear from those of you who saw Jeff Edwards. If you can make it through without crying, you get a medal, because what he shared with us is and was exactly what Tom was getting at. Like, our issues have to do with the fact that our kids are being pushed to the limit every day. So what do we do as the adults in the system to try to provide grace and space for them to live the life they deserve? Or do we just keep the hammer down and keep pushing on it? I would say that we need to provide the grace and space for our kids to thrive. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Now is the opportunity for board communications. I know that there's some of you, nice segue that Dr. Weber gave to you. So if you would like to start, Dr. Weber.
I'm back.
Dr. Ruskin. Dr. Ruskin. I was exhausted listening to
I know, I'm
RJ's.
exhausted too, RJ. I don't know if I can speak after that.
Usually it's
But
the high
thank you.
schoolers report that makes me exhausted. Tonight it definitely is.
Oh, goodness. I'll start with a few other things, because when I talk about Jeff Edwards, I might cry, but I'm not going to talk too much because I don't cry in public, especially on this TV. So it's going to be very brief. Host us tomorrow, as you said, and I'm going to have the opportunity to judge. I usually judge dental sciences, but I gave that up, and tomorrow I am judging forensic science. I requested a new space and place, and we'll let some other dentists do dental sciences. So I'm excited about that. My daughter's actually participating, one of my daughters. So I'm excited. There are so many students in HOSA, over 400 students who participate just from Novi, and it's a regional event. So I'm guessing there'll be 1,500 to 2,000 students over there at the high school. So that's exciting. I'm meeting on Friday with Team 6006, I think it is. It is a girls robotics team from Meadows, and they requested that I meet with them because they want to get some adult feedback on their presentation before they go to state finals. So they called me and asked me to spend a few minutes with them, so I'm looking forward to that, and I was honored that they had requested my feedback. So I'm meeting with them on Friday afternoon. I was excited on Monday that we came up with a name for our mental health parent dialogue, on and on and on. So we condensed it to now be the Novi Mental Health Alliance. So when you're on Twitter and you see that, that's who this group is, but it's not an exclusive group. Anybody can be a part of it. You don't even have to live in Novi. You don't even have to be a parent, just somebody who cares about our kids and the community members. Jeff Edwards, I don't really have a lot of words. I told RJ the other day I don't have many words. It was a powerful presentation. It started off in a space where I wasn't sure where he was going, but as he peeled back the onion, just came back around full circle. And I guess all I can really say is that this administration is working very hard to find many different pieces and avenues. As Mr. Smith said, that this is just one thing, this Bell schedule, to help our kids, and they're working very diligently to find many, many places and spaces that they can give our kids the mental health and wellness opportunities that they need to be our beautiful snowflakes. So Jeff Edwards may be an opportunity in our district to speak with our kids. He may not be. That's a decision that'll need to be made in the future. But his story was just very, very heart-wrenching. And to see a picture of a beautiful boy who's 12 years old, who looks like my kid, your kid, up there, who's no longer with us, should be the message that we always carry with us when we make decisions.
You made it.
Kathy did not.
That's what I was talking about, Carol. It's a snowflake himself.
All right. Did you have anything?
I did not, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mena?
I did. First of all, Dr. Weber, I know sometimes we give you a hard time because you have a lot to say at the end of the meeting, but I gotta thank you. You brought your A game today. That was a lot of great information, and I thank you for that. I also wanted to thank community members for their input tonight. And I understand some of the concerns that were brought up. We obviously care about the mental health of our kids, and I certainly respect the research that was brought before us. But I equally find it important to understand and respect the family challenges that this may cause, and equally, some of the safety concerns that were brought up as well. So know that we'll keep all those things in mind when we make our decision. Lastly, I'm excited that basketball season has started. As many of you know, we started the Novi Athletic Broadcasting Network a few years ago, and we're now broadcasting just about any event that happens in the performance gym, in the stadium, and now we put a new camera in at the soccer field. So if you have kids that participate in any events in any of those locations, whether it be sporting or even band, cheerleading, no, that's not a sport, I probably shouldn't have said it that way. You'll have the opportunity to actually watch it, and where possible, what we try to do is we try to get broadcasters to broadcast those events. So we do that with football, and we started this week again with basketball. We do have a young man who's been working with us for a few years now, and we try to encourage some high school kids to join him and kind of learn the craft. We do have a freshman who showed some interest this year, so we're going to work with him to help out with our basketball broadcasts. We got a lot of students who have come through our schools and have continued on doing broadcasting work. I'll mention Matt Carney because I'll be seeing him Friday at the MAC Championship game. Central Michigan University made it to the MAC Championship, and he is an integral part of their broadcasting and their broadcasting crew there. And Hikaru Kudo, who worked with us quite a few years here as well, is doing a lot of work over at Michigan State University. And again, I'm really proud of it because we're sort of the go-to school now. The MHSAA usually refers people to us whenever other schools want to try to replicate what we're doing. In fact, I think this week we got some calls from St. Ignace High School, and we're working with them to try to get them up and running as well. So thank you. Mr. Gordon for allowing me to participate and help out with this venture, and for your support, because we really couldn't do it without you. That's all I have.
Great. Anything, Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Ms. Mack, for giving us a list of the 16 area schools and their current start times. Oh, thank you, Mr. Gordon. What I thought was interesting was, there's 33% of them that start before we do, and 50% of the list start within 5 minutes of us. Leadership's never easy, and leadership's not always convenient, but leadership is what makes us the #1 school district in the state of Michigan. And I applaud our district and the committee for doing all the work to allow us to continue to lead in this really important area. So I like that. I also want to thank the different residents that got up and spoke. I know something weird happens when you stand at the podium, but you guys all did a good job. And although I'm not at liberty to comment on anything that you shared, I also recognize that there's a number of things that we need to figure out. But I think that in the past we have demonstrated the ability to do that. And I think it might require some different things. In some neighborhoods there are street lights, and others there's not. But we have been blessed with the recent passing of a $180 million bond issue, and I think we could afford a few street lights. I think we could afford to encourage communication amongst neighbors, that maybe if all parents can't get out there and watch the kids, they can take shifts. One parent takes Monday and Wednesday, another takes Tuesday and Thursday. We've got amazing kids. I want to compliment. We have 2 interns presently, Paul Beaverstein and Noah Bean. Noah recently was part of the band that got recognized for, maybe Miss Carter, you know exactly what it was. They won something, some national. I'll put you on the spot because what did they win? Yeah, they won something.
It was in our student board member report.
But
right?
these kids, that's what reminded me that like he goes to school, leaves school, drives to my office because he recognizes value in doing an internship for a Fortune 300 financial services firm, and he works for an hour and a half, and then he probably goes to band, or maybe goes to band in the morning. Jason Smith, and I don't think it was nice for you to comment about Jason's age. He's gone. But the interns, again, Mrs. Carter, there's now 15 or something that serve as interns from the high school for the Nova Education Foundation. That started out, we were looking for 2, and then it went to 4, and now it's at 15. So our kids are amazing. And then I appreciate the work, Mr. Baker, at the middle school, and your commitment and your team's commitment to help the kids that are needing for help, and know that there's at least one young man that's willing to step up and join you in that. And then I wanted to share, if you can, a text, and I'll try to read it quickly. I got a text yesterday at 12:21 in the afternoon from my senior, and she says, "Dad, I just learned something so cool in school, my mind is blown." And then there's a couple emojis. And I say, "Tell me." And she said, "In AP Bio, we are learning about cellular respiration and why and how our body gets energy, and it's super complicated, and I understand it." Her next, "It's crazy how learning works, emoji. I said, "You're going to love college." She replied, "I'm excited. Like, this is so crazy how these cycles happen. Emoji. So the work that you guys do every day with our kids is phenomenal. And I just want to compliment you, the entire staff, and all the work that you do.
Now you know she's going to kill you when you get home.
She's
doing homework.
She's not watching.
She's not watching.
She's learning right now. She's learning more. I do not really have anything to add. I do appreciate the work of the committee. Really, I said before, all the parents that took the time to let us know how they felt about it. Certainly, we'll continue to look at those as we move forward. And, I think that there were surprising things in some of it, and really did appreciate parents that were supplying research as well. So that was also really helpful for us to look at. So Thanks again to this community that cares so very deeply, and thank you all for coming and hanging out with us this evening. It's not very often we have more than Sharon. I'm just kidding. We are glad. It's been nice to see your face. So we do thank you all for being here. We thank you for caring so much about kids that you wanted to be here to hear the discussion. And certainly, if you have additional feedback, we have email addresses. Feel free to send us an email and let us know. So we appreciate you as well, and certainly. I'm a mental health professional, or I was in my other life, and it's really evident to me there's been, significant changes even with my own children. They're 9 years apart in terms of the level of pressure that they have. So I love that we're looking at this. I wish we had done it much sooner, because I certainly think that my youngest two particularly would have really benefited. They struggle. And not with school necessarily, but certainly with some of those anxiety issues and some of the other things that were brought up. And I have to believe some of it has to do with sleep, because I know how much sleep they get. They are out on their own, and they're doing fine though. Just so you know. I mean, one of them's still in college, but they've mustered through it. They're just it is something that I really do wish we would have had the opportunity to look at sooner. So I appreciate the community being supportive, and certainly the strategic planning that we did that kind of rallied people around the idea that we really need to be concerned about the well-being in our community, and certainly for our students. So that said, I would entertain a motion to
move that we adjourn.
All right. Been moved by Mr. Smith and supported by Mrs. Hood. I will call the question. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you again for being here. Oh, thank you again.